Hi there. I wanted to put this brief video together for those who are honestly exploring the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Many people will dismiss it as fantasy and think it's part of the elaborate sham of Christianity that's been peddled through the ages. And this video is not really for them. This video is more for you if you're an honest inquirer and you're wanting to make sense of the resurrection and you have some concerns, some objections, you don't quite get it, but you're wanting to honestly look at some of the evidences and the facts to try and make up your mind as you journey in the Christian faith or towards the Christian faith. The scholar N.T. Wright said that Christianity is like a road that one drives along and you come to a dip in the road, and the road, the dip, it has a river in it, and the road continues on the other side of the dip, and you can see a whole bunch of cars on the other side of the dip, and you wonder how they got there. And the river, the dip, is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You approach it and you look at it and you think, how on earth did those people get from this side to that side? How did they come to comprehend and believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ? And I don't purport that this is going to be a full treatment of the subject. This is just some thoughts for you as you honestly consider and to try help you get clear. I want to deal with 4 facts that William Lane Craig puts forward, and no one fact is sufficient on its own, but they do need proper consideration. As you come as an honest inquirer, here are 4 things, 4 facts, evidences that you need to attend to. The first is that after Jesus' crucifixion, he was buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea. Now, immediately there's some objections. And throughout the centuries and history, there have been conspiracy theories and objections to the burial of Jesus. One is the apparent death theory or the swoon theory, and this theory purports that Jesus never actually died on the cross. He wasn't actually crucified. He was crucified, but he didn't die. They didn't do a good enough job. And they buried him alive, and he then managed to bust out of the tomb and then appear to his grief-stricken disciples and convince them that he was the resurrected Messiah just days later after almost having been crucified. And it's easy, as I put that to you, to see how that takes a lot of faith to believe that could be a possibility. It's just doesn't really hold much water, an honest inquiry that Jesus just survived crucifixion and then managed to break out of a tomb and convince his disciples he was a resurrected Messiah. The evidence is more strongly that, and it's attested to in multiple early sources, independent sources, and you can search more on that. Joseph of Arimathea is an unlikely made-up story. Joseph of Arimathea is said to be part of the Sanhedrin. This is the Jewish ruling council, 70-odd men who made up the highest authority in Judaism. And as such a prominent person, it's highly unlikely that he would be mentioned as part of the story if it didn't actually happen. The most reasonable explanation for what happened is that it actually was Joseph of Arimathea who took Jesus' body and buried it in a tomb. The second fact is that on the Sunday after Jesus' crucifixion, his tomb was discovered by a group of women. Now, there's many conspiracy theories that abound in this. Some of them are that the disciples stole the body, that they conspired together to steal the body of Jesus to beef up their story that their Messiah had risen from the dead. But this encounters some immediate problems. First of all, the disciples were traumatized. Their leader had been murdered, crucified as a criminal, and they hardly had the gumption and the courage to go and plot an elaborate plan to bust their leader out of a tomb. And it also doesn't explain the radical change we see in the disciples later, and I'll talk about that in a second. Another objection or conspiracy is that this was the wrong tomb, that the women discovered the wrong tomb and they were just deluded. There was an empty tomb and they were mistaken that Jesus had risen from death. This is also easily countered by just a follow-up inspection to see that, well, okay, let's go back and have a look that, oh no, that was the wrong tomb. He's actually still there. We got it wrong. But the most logical evidence and following is that he did actually rise and he was found by a woman. Now, this empty tomb is also attested to by multiple early witnesses, but maybe more compellingly, it's that there were a group of women who discovered the empty tomb. Now, in the time of Jesus, if you wanted to have compelling witnesses, you didn't include women in your story. Women were not considered reliable witnesses. In court, their witnesses, their testimony didn't hold any water. And if you wanted to concoct a story using women as your first witnesses to discover the empty tomb of Jesus, it would have just been outlandish. It would have been unbelievable to people. And the only logical, reasonable explanation is that it actually happened this way, that it was actually women who discovered it. Also, an objection to this, if the empty tomb of Jesus wasn't discovered, it would be very easy to just go find the tomb and just point it out and say, well, no, there he is. There is. You can't come with this empty tomb story. There is the tomb, and he is still there. But that's obviously not what happened, and that's why it's not part of the story. I want to read a passage from Scripture here that can help us understand a bit more. It's from Matthew 28, and it says this: "While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, 'You're to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble.' So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed, and the story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day." Such an elaborate cover-up, but hardly necessary if you could just take people to the tomb and say, Jesus is behind there. There's no real story here. Fact number 3 is that on various occasions and in different circumstances, Jesus appeared to different groups of people. Paul has a list of eyewitnesses that we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and I want to read some of that to you. He says, "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James and then to all the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. For I'm the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God." It's a long list that Paul puts forward as people who Jesus physically appeared to, and you may have some doubts around those, but perhaps the most compelling witness is Paul. It's possible to write off the other witnesses, those who were longing to see Jesus, and you can write off the appearance of Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, as part of their figment of their imagination. Wishful thinking. They longed to see him resurrected, and so they just imagined it happening. But Paul was a different case. Paul was a persecutor of Christians. He was a persecutor of the church. He hated Christians. He threw his best energies and efforts into murdering them and having them imprisoned. And we have to explain this radical turnaround in the life of Paul. And the most logical explanation, as he puts forward, is that he saw and encountered the resurrected Jesus in a vision, and it totally turned his life around. He went from being a well-known persecutor to a persecuted evangelist. And we have to be able to explain this radical change in this man. The fourth fact is that the original disciples suddenly and irrevocably came to believe that Jesus was risen from the dead, against earlier feeling that this was not going to happen. And you think of the situation that the disciples found themselves in. Their leader had been crucified. They were terrified, leaderless. They had given years of their life to following this man, and now he was gone. He was not the Messiah they expected him to be. Also, Jewish beliefs at the time precluded anyone rising in glory and immortality before the general resurrection at the end of times. And so they just would not have been anticipating this to happen. We have to explain how do you explain the radical change in the life of the disciples. And William Lane Craig puts it this way in a very famous quote. He says this: "Suppose that no resurrection or miracles occurred. How then could a dozen men, poor, coarse, and apprehensive, turn the world upside down? If Jesus did not rise from the dead, then either we must believe that a small, unlearned band of deceivers overcame the powers of the world and preached an incredible doctrine over the face of the whole earth, which in turn received this as fiction and the sacred truth of God. Or else, if they were not deceivers, but enthusiasts, we must believe that these extremists, carried along by the impetus of some extravagant fancy, managed to spread a falsity that not only common folk, but statesmen and philosophers as well embraced as the sober truth. Because such a scenario is simply unbelievable, the message of the apostles which gave birth to Christianity must be true." We have to explain that these disciples, who were timid and afraid and often doubting of their leader, became robust, courageous leaders of the early church, many who suffered a martyr's death. And the most logical explanation to this is that they saw the resurrected Jesus and they were convinced that he was the Son of God. He was who he said he would be. I hope these brief provocations will help you as you continue to engage around the person of Jesus. If you would like to engage with us more, you can contact us on any of our social media channels or on our church's WhatsApp number. We would love to engage with you. We've got a whole team of people who would love to continue the conversation with you as you seek to find clarity around faith in Jesus Christ. God bless you.